We're back here on the first team for our first scouting report episode of the Edge class. I'm Joe DeLeone, joined by Ryan Roberts, and today we're going to be breaking down Jared Verse from Florida State and Dallas Turner of the University of Alabama. Ryan, it's kind of funny to pick these guys to compare the two because one was a highly recruited kid who hasn't necessarily put it all together just yet, but the other was an under-recruited kid who played at an FCS program for a couple of years before transitioning to Florida State. And it feels like he is ready to go and play in the NFL. We're obviously going to do a little bit more of a deep dive, but it's kind of interesting to see that difference in paths for these two guys, how they ended up where they are.
Yeah, I mean, they are. I mean, if we're just talking about the recruiting side of things, I mean, you're right, Joe. I mean, we're talking about a kid in Dallas Turner who was a high 4 or 5-star caliber type of player. And then we're talking about Jared Verse, who we'll get into the background, but he was a 0-star going to Albany and was more of a high school tight end than he was a defensive player, right? So very different. There's no doubt. And stylistically, they're pretty far apart as well. I mean, which is kind of weird because they actually have similar size. I mean, Verse is listed at 6'4", 248, and Turner's listed at 6'4", 242, but they are polar opposites as far as their style as players. But it's going to be an intriguing one, man, because I think that this is a great podcast for, the cliche that's always like, if you can play, we'll find you type of thing about the NFL. And it's very cliche, but in this case, they did find Jared Verse, like they did find him. So, I mean, there is some validity to that conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad we found Jared Verse, Ryan, because I got to say, as we're going to get into this, I was so freaking juiced up watching Jared Verse. He is one of the most dominant edge rushers I've watched. I know I haven't been in the scouting game for long enough, but the tape that he put out on LSU and then also Syracuse is some of the best tape that I've seen from an edge rusher ever. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go on YouTube, pull up the highlights, watch what he does against LSU, because my man was causing problems every single down. Now, what I'm referring to in that sense, the guy is stupid strong. He's twitchy. He is flexible. He's got great acceleration. But what he does to opposing offensive linemen is violent. He is popping dudes back, and good offensive linemen for that matter, which leads him to being not a crazy productive player, but one who I think in the NFL is going to be very, very productive.
Well, I mean, he's got a fascinating background. Like I said, he's a Pennsylvania guy originally. He is a player that was a 0-star. Joe, you want to hear his fantastic high school stats as a senior on defense?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
He had 14 tackles as a senior in high school playing defense.
That's it?
Yeah, dude, he didn't play defense in high school, man. He was more of a tight end. It didn't make any dang sense, but that's kind of how he was used in high school. And, I mean, then he goes to Albany. They have the redshirt season in 2020, where I don't even know. Did Albany even play football that year? I think most FCS did not play football in 2020, right? So, did they even play? Maybe didn't even play. I'm not sure, though.
No. Yeah, I don't think he did.
But then he has the 2021 season where he's double-digit tackles for loss, double-digit sacks, domination, and then he transitions obviously to Florida State. And I mean, you heard in the greatest clip ever was 2021. It was against Syracuse when he was with Albany, and he had that one play where Sean Tucker went for a touchdown, but he nearly hawked him down from the backside. And if you remember Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker could run a little bit, man. Like, he was injured during the draft process, but he was probably going to be a 4.4 something athlete if he would have been able to test. And Verse just hawked him down from the sideline and almost made a tackle like about 40 yards downfield. This kid is a stupid athlete, man. Like, explosive-wise, he's got good length to him, but that explosion and that ability to create power and momentum is just rare stuff. I mean, I remember last year, you want to hear how high I was on Verse early, Joe? I watched one game. I watched the Florida State game, first game of the season, right after it happened. I went back to Old 22 and watched it, and I recommended it to an agent, and I told my buddy he's going to be a first-round pick whenever he chooses to come out. Like, that's how certain I was of it. That game against Florida State last year was against LSU. Excuse me. Florida State against LSU. After that game, I was just like, that is the most silly game I've ever seen in my life. Like, it really was. That was one of the best games I have ever seen of a defensive end on the college level. It was, and he was playing against decently talented offensive tackles. I mean, I think Will Campbell and Emory Jones ended up making like freshman All-American last year, didn't they? At least
Yeah.
one of them. Like,
Yeah.
they're not bad players. And they just he took those kids to the woodshed, man. Like, it was no contest. The ability for him to overwhelm at the point of attack, both as a run stopper and pass rusher, slippery rusher. No one can counteract him at the top of his track, man. And like, he's not the bendiest guy of all time. I think it's solid flexibility though, but his explosiveness, his ability to create speed to power, absolutely bonkers. So yes, just turn on the LSU game last year against Florida State, and you will see why Jared Verse is going to be a very highly drafted player this year.
Yeah, the big thing for me is the power that he brings to the position. He's also somebody who has very active, strong hands. I think that it's not a one-to-one comp, but a lot of the stuff that we talked about with Will Anderson last cycle, you can make some comparisons in the sense where he's not huge. This isn't a guy who is 270 pounds and he's a power-based rusher. He's only like 250 and he's still generating the power of guys that are significantly bigger than him. I think what he's able to bring to this position and to very clearly disrupt and also dominate offensive tackles that are much larger than he is, that stuff is scary. That stuff is frightening. That stuff absolutely translates to the next level. And look, we talked about this with Olu Fashanu. I would go as far as to say that I think that Jared Verse, had he declared this past cycle, would have been a top 10 pick. I think he probably could have gone over Tyree Wilson had he declared, but that doesn't end up happening. And right now, having only watched 3 of the edge rushers so far before we get to those top 5 rankings, I don't foresee anyone surpassing him. Like the tape is that good that he is going to be really freaking dangerous throughout this season and then heading into his rookie year. The guy, it's stunning to see how far along he is for a guy that just last season was at Albany and this was his first year at the Power 5 level.
I'm still a little bit shocked, to be honest, that Florida State convinced Jared Verse to go back to school. I really am. Like, I think he was going to be a top 15 pick. Joe, looking back at, sorry, I'm geeking out a little bit over his track stuff when he was in high school. So he was a 22.74 200-meter runner. And now he plays defensive end. He ran the 100, 200, 400, and he was on the 4x400 relay at track and field, which is just bonkers for a guy that's now playing defensive end on the Power 5 level. It's just nuts. But I really think that this was Florida State's biggest win as far as returnees. I remember everyone was talking about like Jordan Travis coming back. I'm like, yeah, that's nice getting Jordan Travis back. But convincing Jared Verse enough that like, hey, man, we got a chance to be really good next year. You got to come back and help us become that type of team. What a massive victory. I mean, quite literally, this kid has the inside track to being the first defensive end off the board in 2024 NFL draft. He has a chance to be considered one of the best defensive ends to come out in a couple of years. Like, I think he has that type of upside. He is a different player than a couple of the guys that we've seen, but I do think that there are just some ridiculous traits to work with, man. The explosiveness. And one thing, this kid's going to test phenomenally when he comes out, man. Like, he's going to run fast. He's probably going to have some stupid explosive numbers. This kid's a freak show. He's a freak athlete, which is, again, why I'm so puzzled. I really want to go and talk to his high school head coach and be like, hey, man, like, was this kid just like 200 pounds coming out of high school? Like, what's the deal with him being so under recruited? It's just bizarre.
Well, part of me wonders what took him so long to playing defense. Like that's one of the weirdest parts for me is like, I want to know why we didn't get more of him playing the defensive side of the football when he was in high school.
So his thing says at Central Columbia, Joe, he only played both sides of the ball as a senior. So his senior year, he had more receptions, 15, than he did than total tackles of 14 tackles. So don't know why, man, but he was more of an offensive player, at least as a senior, than he was a defensive player. Don't know.
What we call bad high school coaching. That's just
probably,
leave it at that.
Or maybe he's grown an inch or two and he's gained about 40 pounds. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's different circumstances sometimes. There is.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand that, but I don't know. I always lean the side of it was probably better than they thought he was, and they didn't realize it until it was too late. Let's just put it at that. But Jared Verse, we're big fans of Jared Verse on this program because he is so freaking dominant. Dallas Turner is, I just want to tell you folks about an exciting new partnership that we have with this channel. with Underdog Fantasy. Ever since I joined, I've been having so much fun. There are so many different exciting games that make watching games during the offseason more exciting. I'm not the biggest basketball fan, but it has made it way more entertaining since I found Underdog Fantasy. And my favorite game to play so far, which I think you should try out, is Pick'em. It is so easy to play. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite player's stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your Pick'em slip, get every pick right, and take home some cold hard cash. Use code HACK, H-A-C-K, HACK, like the name of this channel. Use code HACK to get your first deposit doubled up to $100 by Underdog. Go sign up. You won't regret it. You're going to have a blast. Check out Underdog Fantasy. I also want to tell you folks about our other recurring sponsor that we have on this channel, that being BetOnline, betonline.ag, which has all the updated odds, news, and anything for sports betting. It's my go-to source for when I want to be betting specifically on games. I love betting on college basketball or the NBA, especially, again, during the offseason. Always looking for more fun ways to be focused in on some of these other sports. It's betonline.ag and use promo code BELIEVE50. It's promo code BELIEVE50 to get 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts.